Diversity Beyond the Checkbox is your trusted podcast for meaningful conversations. And now there's a new way to dive deeper. Visit our new website, beyondthecheckbox.com. It's loaded with podcast episodes, valuable resources, and even exclusive bonus content. Learn more and join the movement. Check out beyondthecheckbox.com today by clicking the link in the show notes. Now let's get to the episode.
Welcome to Season 10 of Diversity Beyond the Checkbox, proudly presented by the Diversity Movement and part of the Living Corporate Network. I'm your host, Jackie Ferguson, author, business leader, and human rights advocate. In this podcast, we're diving deep into the stories of trailblazers, game changers, and glass ceiling breakers who share insights in professional success and personal development. Thank you for being part of this amazing community. Enjoy the show. Thank you for joining this episode of Diversity Beyond the Checkbox. Today, I am talking to Fiona Lloyd, Global Brand President of Carrot and Executive Sponsor of Social Impact at Dentsu Media, with more than 20 years experience working with global brands. Fiona, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to get into this conversation. Fiona, let's start by talking about your very multifaceted role. So you do a lot of different things. Will you talk to us about all of the things that you do in your role?
Yeah, so on the Cara side of things, I'm obviously the global president, as you said, for Cara. And that really is about managing a portfolio of global clients that we partner with as Cara. And then looking after all of the local markets in which we operate. So supporting them, making sure that our network is developed in a consistent way, that we're evolving and innovating for our clients, and that everybody's connected and learning from each other. So that's kind of the Cara side of things. And then the social impact role that I do, I'm the executive sponsor for social impact, which really means that I'm championing everything that we're doing from a sustainability and diversity perspective and making sure that that is embedded into everything that we're doing as the media practice within Dentsu. So not just Cara, working with our teams in iProspect and Dentsu X and different parts of the business. And then outside of that as well, the most important role is that I'm a mother of two teenagers. I'm a husband of a private investigator. And some of my team describe me as like the mother of Noah's Ark, because over the years, I seem to have collected a number of animals.
Well, tell me, Fiona, about your animals. We have to get into that.
Yeah. So when my second daughter was born, we made the decision to move back actually to the village where I grew up in the countryside in Staffordshire, in the middle of England. I got back into horse riding. So the next thing was a horse, and then there's another one, and then there's a dog, and then there's another one, and then there's a cat, and then there's another one. Anyway, I've lost count now, but it's pretty busy here.
I love that. And it's, I'm so interested in how you keep all of those things together. So any one of those things that you're doing is a lot, right?
Right.
Being a mother of two teenagers, working as, an executive in a company, let alone this kind of hybrid role or this two-part role that you've got, and then managing all those amazing animals at your home. How do you keep it all together, Fiona? How do you manage it all?
You just got to, first thing is to accept you can't give everything 100% of yourself at all times. And you have to reconcile that in order to live that amazingly fulfilled life, and I will say that my life is very fulfilled, I'm very happy with it, I wouldn't change anything for the world. It's just that balancing it and recognizing that you can't give everything 100% all of the time, and knowing that, right, I chunk it up into weeks and say, right, this week, maybe I'm traveling. Next week's a really good example. I'm going to be in Paris for 4 days next week. So my job and what I need to get done next week is going to have the vast majority of my focus. So, who can I lean on to support me? The girls are here in their holidays from school. So, it's just pulling in and knowing that I can't do it all, and knowing that there's a plan in place to make sure that everything else, and then accepting that some things just aren't going to be perfect. is a
Yes.
big thing as well. That's something I've really had to learn to come to terms with over the years, is that it's never going to be perfect all of the time. You've got to live with a bit of chaos.
Absolutely. Fiona, that's such good advice. And, that's one of the things that I've had to learn over the years. I think so many of us as women, especially, feel like we need to be, an A plus at work every week, an A plus at home every week, an A plus as a mother or whatever it is that we're doing. We have to be great at it every single day. And that's not possible. We have to understand that sometimes that mother piece needs to come first. Sometimes the work piece needs to come first. And understanding and giving that good balance is what makes us able to do all of the things. But if we're looking for 100% in everything every day, we're never going to achieve that. So thank you for that advice. That is good advice. Good advice. Fiona, you went from a PA to running one of the largest media organizations in the world. Share with us how you got there. That's it. That's a steep climb. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, there was never a grand plan. There was never a plan. So I graduated from university with a degree in international business studies. And as part of that degree, I got to spend a year studying in the US. And the one thing that I knew when I left university was that I wanted travel to be a part of my job. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to experience different cultures, but I really wasn't set on an industry. So I decided to, when I was doing my A levels, my mother made me do a secretarial typing course alongside my A levels, which at the time I absolutely hated. But actually, when I left university, it was really valuable because it meant I could do is go and do temp admin work in lots of different industries and get a feel for the people, get a feel for the work and the culture. And then I hit the dizzy heights of advertising with one of the roles. I was in Ogilvy and Mather. And it was I just found like this is where I want to be. I love the creativity, I love the energy, I love the people. I was really inspired by the work. So I joined Mindshare, which was a media agency that WPP was creating at the time. I was one of the first employees as a team assistant. And then within a few months, I'd worked my way into a graduate role, and that was it. Then I was on the ladder. And then I think really there's no real secret sauce. I think it does come back to being your authentic self. And I'll talk about that a bit. I want to talk about that a lot today because I think it's really, really important. But really, it was just, for me, it was a combination of just strong delivery, building that foundation. Like I was dependable. I was somebody who was going to get the job done on time, high quality. And then creating a positive energy around the work that I was doing, no matter what level I was within the organization, that I was somebody with good energy, that was great to work with, that people wanted to be a part of that team or a part of that work that I was doing. And then the final point, I think, was just having an opinion on things and not being afraid to share that opinion. I think back then, the way that I went about sharing the opinion, I look back and go, oh, I wouldn't be advising people to kind of do that, because I think I became a bit alpha. I was in a very male environment. Media was very, very male dominated when I was starting my career. So I think I became a bit alpha with that and didn't perhaps listen as much as I should. I did a lot of talking, but I was somebody that had an opinion on things. And, at the end of the day in our industry, that's what our clients pay us for. They pay us to have an opinion. So I think it's just a combination of those three things. And then, things have just happened without any big plan.
I love that. And that's the thing, Fiona. I think a lot of young people, especially just coming out of college, feel like the pressure that they have to have it all figured out. And really you don't. It's about making the most of opportunities and taking those risks to step up into the next role, but you don't have to have it all figured out. And you're prime example of being super successful and not having all of that in your plan.
No.
I love that. I love it.
Yeah, winging it a bit a few times.
Yeah. And we all do that. And sometimes that's how you fall into what you're meant to do. So I think that's fantastic. Fiona, you talk a lot about the importance of mental health and wellness. Why do we not take this more seriously? We're starting to talk about it in the workplace and in our families and communities, but we're not taking this as seriously as we should as part of our well-being, right? We go to the doctor for our, yearly physical, and we take our medication and we try to eat right and we try to exercise. But why aren't we taking mental health more seriously? And what are some recommendations for us, Fiona, that you have for us to take those necessary steps forward?
So I think the volume of conversations, as you've said, and the quality of the conversations about mental health is really, really good, and versus where we were a few years ago. I think the biggest thing that stops people from talking about it, and if people talk about it, people understand it more, people will take different actions, is fear, right? It's that fear and that stigma of being judged. And you spent 25 years building your reputation. What will you destroy it if you admit that? Will people think, oh, I can't hack it? So I think there's a massive fear still of people living with things, because at the end of the day, understanding education, changing behavior, it stems from people being comfortable talking about it. So I think that is the most important thing. I think giving people the space as well. Like, we're all on a treadmill. We'll all just go, 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 go on to the next thing. And actually, one of the things that I learned last year was that we're not built as human beings for the world that we now live in, right? We have a central nervous system that needs time in rest and digest as it does much in flight and flight. And the technology that we use, the way that we work, as much as it's wonderful that we have the flexibility now to work from home, it's hard switching off. Oh, I'll just check my emails before I go to bed. And then your brain is whirring and the quality of your sleep is impacted. And it's all this vicious cycle. And actually, one of the things that I learned last year is when the doctor said to me, like, you need to manually adjust. Everybody needs to manually adjust, because if you just keep going with the way that the world is, we will never get enough time in that rest and digest phase. And it's so true. So I think learning that, trying to create the space for people to just think about their lives, like almost do, as I said, I do my little weekly review. That's all part of how well, I'm managing that as well. And the other thing as well, I think we take on a lot. I suppose this is particularly pertinent, I think, in our industry, because it's so fast moving. We're all being asked for innovation and doing things differently. There's a new opportunity that's popping up all the time. And that's really, really exciting. But when do we ever stop and say, right, I'm going to do all of that because that's really exciting and my job's about innovation, but I'm going to stop doing these things? And we have a tendency to take more and more things on, because we're ambitious, because we want to be seen to be driving things forward and doing more. But do we really stop? And that to-do list then just becomes completely unmanageable. So I think having those conversations about balancing that better is really, really important. I think the single most important thing everybody could do is just be vulnerable and show vulnerability. I think creating a safe space for people to have conversations is super important. And I talk a lot about emotional intelligence, and putting emotional intelligence being as important as performance and intelligence when you're reviewing people, is how you create the right culture so that you have that safe space for people to have those conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things, Fiona, that you mentioned when you were talking about your authentic self, and I want to dig into that a little bit. As I think about my own career, when I felt overworked and couldn't bring my authentic self to the workplace, that's when I felt burnout faster. That's when I was exhausted at the end of the day. When I felt like I had to, put on a face to go to work, right? And I wasn't living in my authentic Jackie, right? There was a code switching and all of the things that we hear about. Tell us, what is living in your authentic self? What does that mean? And how do we begin to discover that and practice that?
That's a big question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it comes down to happiness at the end of the day. If you're living your authentic self, if you're being true to your values, if you are operating and interacting with people in a way that is true to the core of who you are, you're going to be happy. You're going to be really, really happy. If you are having to compromise some of those things, if you are having to fake it and pretend and put on a face, then you are not going to be an unhappy person. And it really is as simple as that. And the moments that you see yourself in places where you look in the mirror, or you think in the evening, you're taking your makeup on, think about how your day's been, and have you felt happy or have you felt unhappy? If that face looking back at you is an unhappy face most of the time, then it's only going one way. It's only going to burn, and it's only going to get worse and worse and worse. Because burnout is just exhaustion, physical, mental, emotional exhaustion. And I think at the core of that really is your own personal happiness and how you feel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Words are powerful, and communication is key to success in business and relationships. How do you ensure your words foster welcoming, inclusive, and safe environments for everyone? The answer is inclusive language. The Inclusive Language Handbook, a guide to better communication and transformational leadership, available in paperback and as an ebook, explains today's best practices for inclusive word choice and common phrases to avoid, with guided exercises to increase understanding and improve your impact immediately. No matter what your role, make sure your words land respectfully and effectively. Order your copy today by visiting theinclusivelanguagehandbook.com. And so, how do you think about, Fiona, how do we begin to live in that, right? When maybe we're in a workplace that doesn't have that sense of belonging for us, how do we begin to really just be who we are, be comfortable with that? How do we navigate that in the workplace?
Well, I think you have to ask yourself, if you can't be your authentic self genuinely, and you feel that the culture of the organization is against that, you have to ask yourself whether you're in the right place. Genuinely, because there are some organizations that you just aren't going to fit with, that you're just not going to gel with, that don't have your values. So that's the first thing, is to really go, okay, I might have a nice job title, I might have a nice paycheck every month, but really, is this a company where my values and who I am align? I'm going to be taking energy from that culture every day and bringing it into my home and into my friendships and all of those things. If you feel like there's parts of it there, but it's not quite working for you, then the key thing is just finding a way to talk about it. And you have to talk about it. It's not an option not to. It's never an option to sit there and do nothing and think somebody else is going to change it for you. You have to make that change for yourself. And if there are certain things that within your role that think this part of my role really suits me being my authentic self, like really demonstrate to your line managers or your team and whoever you are, that when you're doing that kind of work and you're set up in this kind of environment, you really excel and your performance is much better than in other environments, for example. So I think there's always case studies that you can build that to demonstrate things that way. And then I've always found, we're not great at everything. If you do things in that way, you'll naturally navigate then towards a job that fulfills you. We've always going to have to do a bit of something that we don't particularly love. But in the main, that's fulfilling work for you. And that's where you can bring your authentic self.
Absolutely. That's such great advice, Fiona. Thank you for that. Fiona, you took a step back in your career some time ago to focus on your own well-being. Can you share with us your story and what that step back looked like for you?
Yeah, so I did. So this was almost 12 months ago. I took a step back from the business for a couple of months. And I didn't know if it was mental health. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I just knew that I would come into my office every day, wherever that was, and I was just completely overwhelmed with everything. Things that I enjoy doing had become less of a joy. Everything was a chore. I am a lunatic at Christmas, and I couldn't wait for Christmas to be over. I just wanted to go to bed and have it all be done and in the dishwasher. And it was just things I was noticing about myself that were just very, very different. So I went to see the doctor, and she said, exactly, she said, you burnt out. You need to take a step back. You need to take stock. I can give you all the medical stuff, but for now, that's enough. Take a step back, and let's get you the right support around you. And I absolutely dreaded. I didn't know how to have the conversation with work. I was very, very uncomfortable with this advice that I was getting from the doctor. And in the end, I was in a status meeting with my boss, and I just blurted it out, and it came out like just didn't make a lot of sense at all. And the doctor says, and I must do this, and I feel like this, and it was just bleh. But it was out, and actually, the response that I got was incredible, because at that point, you're like a vulnerable child, and you need the organization to be the parent, right? They need to be the grown up. They need to say, right, this is what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. This date, this person's going to take on this responsibility, blah, 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 blah. And then you're out in 2 days. And I was really, really fortunate at Dentsu that was my experience. And they kind of were like, right, go. And then, of course, it's like, well, what do I do? Nothing. Just do nothing. Which, again, for me, is very, very
Tough, right?
uncomfortable. So I did crazy things. I went out and bought myself a load of fancy new yoga gear. I've never done yoga in my life. Do yoga. You've got to breathe. I did about 3 sessions. Hated it. Never did that again. I went for a sound bath. I did all of these things that the podcast told me to do.
Right.
And then just found my way with it. Actually, was just walking with the dogs, being outside, doing the thing, connecting. Like I properly connecting with some friends as well, that my friendships had become so superficial because I didn't have the time to really invest into those friendships. So it was all of that really, and therapy. I mean, that made me really, really uncomfortable. Therapy was just an awful word for me. But my goodness, I needed it. And I needed to understand the science of what was happening with me physically, to understand what was happening with me mentally. And once I understood that, then I was able to start to think about, right, what am I going to do differently? How am I going to live my life so that I don't end up here again? And I just needed to rest as well. I needed to take time to just rest and come back and get my energy levels back up.
I appreciate your sharing that, Fiona. And rest is so important. I had someone a few seasons back on the podcast that played on the championship Duke soccer team. And he said that high performance is a combination of hard work and recovery. And that's one of the things we often miss just in our daily lives, is the recovery that we need after going and doing and thinking and moving. We need that time to just rest. And I appreciate your saying that, because it's just so true. So many of us, Fiona, struggle with burnout in the workplace. And, what are some of the signs, and you named some that you were experiencing, but what are some more of the signs that we should be looking for with regard to burnout, so that we can begin to address it and mitigate it before we're at a point where, we feel totally lost and too far gone? What are the things we need to be looking for?
So I think there's never been a more important time to really know your team, like to really know the people around you, not as an account manager or a PA or a strategist, but as the people that they are and what's going on in their lives as well. Because I think there's no formula to it, but it's just spotting change. It's just spotting change in people. They've been a bit flat recently in that meeting. Like, nobody comes to work every day wanting to do a shitty job. Nobody does. Everybody wants to do a great job. If they don't do their best job, there's a reason for that. Or what is the reason for that? So I just think that self-awareness piece, and creating those conditions for self-awareness within the team and having those conversations is super important. One little trick that somebody told me, I think it was my therapist actually, she said, when you're doing a one-to-one meeting with one of your team, then the natural question that you'll ask is, how's everything going? You open a meeting, how's everything going? Change that question to, how are you? And you'll get how everything's going, but you'll get a whole lot of other stuff as well. And you'll be able to look in that person's eyes. And if you know them and if you've understood everything that's going on in their life, you'll be able to spot whether they're okay and whether you need to delve a little bit deeper into that. But it is just like the humanity that we need to have now as we're doing business is super, super important. And it comes back to that emotional intelligence piece as well. And really like rewarding that and talking about it is so important.
Fiona, I totally agree. Years ago, we used to just come to work, do our job. How's everything? Everything's fine, no problem. Leave all that stuff at the door. And now what we're realizing in the workplace is whether they want to or not, that those things come with them, right? And those stressors and the exhaustion and all of those things. And as a good manager, you've got to know your team well enough to be able to identify that, and really have a conversation that allows them to be, as you said earlier in the conversation, vulnerable with you about how they're really doing.
Yeah.
And
I
it,
think the language is really important that you use as well,
yeah,
because a word that I use a lot when I talk to our leaders and carers, that we're a family. It's that our carer family. We spend so much time at work with each other. And and I know some people kind of look at me and go, family. But I think language is really, really important, because if you say and use words like that, then you're automatically creating a feeling of safety for people. If you, and we work in advertising, so we're lucky. We don't need to be so formal about things. We can be pretty casual with some of our language, but I do think language is really, really important for how you describe things and how you go about doing things, and making it really, really human for people. It helps them be more vulnerable, be more open about how they're feeling, I think.
absolutely. Fiona, do you have recommendations for how organizations, so we talked about individuals, we talked about managers, but how organizations can put into place policies that help employees that are facing, some mental health challenges or burnout? What are some things that organizational leaders can do?
So I think every organization should have a speak up part of the organisation. We have it at Dentsu. It is now busier than it has ever been, because we've managed to create that culture for people to speak up if they're unhappy about something. And then obviously there's the um, all of the HR systems and everything can kick in off the back of that. But creating the culture is the single most important thing, where people feel safe enough to speak up. And then when they do want to speak up, making it really, really easy for them, and making that very professional as well. Making that, and so they can see action from it as well. So we have things that come out of our global check-in survey every year, out of our speak up themes that come out of that, which are then addressed, communicated very, very openly. This is how our people are feeling. And then programs put in place to address some of those things that are very visible. It might be just a Teams site where people meet once a month to talk about a specific thing that they're struggling with. We've got one at the moment running for parenting teenagers. I've dropped into it a couple of times and picked up a couple of tips. But that's great, because that is just full of people being vulnerable about how they're feeling. And you go on the Teams chat, and you see the conversations that are happening. So making sure the forums are there to listen, and then demonstrating to people very visibly that through that listening, the organization is becoming stronger and more inclusive because of it.
Fiona, that's such great advice. And I love the forums. One of the things that I'm noticing in the workplace, or in addition to mental health, people are talking more about menopause and aging in the workplace. Let's talk about that a little, because you talked about, being a parent of teenagers. But as we get older, right, we go through, motherhood, and there's support in place for mothers. Now, fortunately, that's being expanded to, parental leave, which is very important. But what about when we're aging in the workplace and dealing with symptoms of menopause and things like that? What are
Yeah.
some of your thoughts around that, Fiona?
So this is another passion point of mine, the menopause piece, because actually, when I had my diagnosis from the doctor, she said I had two things going on. I had burnout and I had an uneducated management of the menopause. So that was a whole other learning journey that I went on. And you really look at it and wow, it's phenomenal. It really is a moment in a woman's life where you're experiencing all of those emotions all over again. All of your little traits become amplified. The voice on your shoulder that's always been there gets louder and louder. The imposter syndrome gets bigger and bigger. And it really is quite a significant thing for women at a certain point in their lives. So again, it comes back to being able to talk about it, being aware of it, organizations visibly showing that they understand that is happening. And again, we're very fortunate. We do talk about it. There are forums, there are all sorts of things that are happening within the organization for you to learn more. So then it becomes part of the conversation. But it takes a little bit of bravery as well from us women in the workplace that have a voice and sit on panels or go to external events or talking doing presentations internally, to just kind of normalize it a bit. I was on a panel a couple of months ago and I completely forgot one of the stats that I'd got in my head that I wanted to share about something. But I just openly said, oh, sorry, menopause moment there. I can't remember that. At least I can remember my own name today. And and everyone sort of chuckled. And I don't mean
Yeah,
to do it to get a laugh out of everyone. I'm doing it because I want people to see it's totally normal and it's okay. And
absolutely.
that's what actually happens. Some days you just cannot find your words. So yeah, I think a combination of the two things, again, the vulnerability piece is key, and then education.
Absolutely. And I think that's right, Fiona. We have to talk about those things. I was recently at a conference and Tracy Ellis Ross was there, and she was having a hot flash on the stage and she said it. And I was like, this is so refreshing, because in years past, that's just not something that you talked about in the workplace. It's something that you just dealt with, and now it's becoming normalized to have these conversations, because we need to support women who are 50 the same way we're supporting women who are 25. So I love that. Thank you for that, Fiona. Fiona, this has been such a great conversation. What is the message that you want to leave our listeners with today?
So I think there's three things. We are always a work in progress, right? Self-awareness is the most powerful thing that you can have. Self-awareness over perfection every day of the week, right? We are always a work in progress, and that's what we have to remember. The second thing is talking. It is the most powerful tool to making progress, right? And whether that be if you're having things are going really, really well for you, talking about it, paying it forward, sharing your experiences of how you've overcome things is super important. But then talking and picking people up as they go along the way. As I said, being able to look into people's eyes, talking, the most powerful tool we have. And then the final piece is that voice in your head. And we all have it, whether we're male, whether we're female, we all have that voice in our head that casts doubt on our ability. And learn to recognize when it is that voice and when it is reality. And importantly, and these words came from an old boss of mine and they've stuck with me, is learn how to shut the bitch up. When the voice starts on the shoulder, learn how to shut that bitch up, because it can be the thing that will unravel you. And actually, it was the best advice to me, because I see it so clearly now. And I remember that little line. I think, yeah, that's just that little
Love it.
voice. Shut up.
I love it, Fiona. Thank you so much. I love that. Fiona, how can listeners learn more about your work and get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, as much as I'm active as much as I can be, on our Cara Global channels as well. The culture that I've talked about here goes beyond just me. There's many people at Cara that embody that and live a lot of the things that we've just been talking about. And then we have a Cara podcast, which they let me on every now and again, called The Human Element. So you can catch me on there too.
Awesome. Fiona, thank you so much. This has been such an important and great conversation.
Thank you for having me, Jack.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Diversity Beyond the Checkbox. If you loved this show, please take a moment to share it with a friend, leave a rating and review, and subscribe so you'll be reminded when new episodes are released. Become part of our community on Instagram, LinkedIn, X, YouTube, and TikTok, or subscribe to our newsletter at beyondthecheckbox.com. This show is part of the Living Corporate Network, sponsored by the Diversity Movement, and edited and produced by Earfluence. I'm Jackie Ferguson. Take care of yourself and each other.